Chapter 11 Indian Culture, a Further Evolution. The British rule introduced new changes and innovations in various aspects of arts and literature.
Introduction of printing technology.
New forms of publications. Rise of a new visual culture. Art with the nationalist theme. Influence of European art. Flowering of literature. Music. Photography. Drama. Printing press. Introduction of printing technology. The printing press first came to Goa with the
Portuguese missionaries
in the mid of 16th century. English East India Company
began to import
press machines. From 1780, James Augustus Hickey
began to publish a weekly magazine
called the Bengal Gazette. It was mainly a commercial paper which published a lot of advertisements. By the end of the 18th century, a number of newspapers and journals began to be printed. One of the first newspapers to be published by an Indian was the Bengal Gazette, brought out by Gangadhar Bhattacharya. New forms of publications. With the introduction of printing, new avenues of writing were created. Novels based on human emotions, relationships, and experiences began to be printed. Short stories and essays about social and political themes were also written and printed. Rise of a new visual culture. With the introduction of printing press, visual images could be reproduced in multiple copies. Kalighat paintings and paintings by Raja Ravi Verma were printed for circulation. These paintings were displayed in calendars and they could be bought by common people to decorate their homes. Kalighat paintings. Kalighat paintings were created by local scroll painters and potters who lived around the temple of Kalighat in Calcutta in the early 19th century. Main themes of these paintings were mythological, that is, they contained images of gods and goddesses. From the middle of the 19th century, the Kalighat painters also took up social and political themes.
Sometimes
caricatures and cartoons ridiculing those who aped the Western lifestyle and Western habits were also painted. The paintings by Raja Ravi Verma. Raja Ravi Verma belonged to the royal family of Travancore in Kerala. His paintings adopted the Western style of oil paintings, but his themes were from Indian mythology, for example, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Art with the nationalist theme. With the rise of nationalism in late 19th century, many paintings were printed and circulated which carried a nationalist image. A leading nationalist artist was Abanindranath Tagore, the nephew of Rabindranath Tagore. He painted the famous image of Bharat Mata, a divine and spiritual figure. Devotion to this mother figure was an expression of nationalism. Influence of European art. Traditional Indian painting was influenced by European techniques. Europeans introduced a realistic style of painting in India. Their paintings were lifelike and based on what the artists saw. European artists also brought with them the technique of oil painting. A special style of painting introduced by the Europeans in India was landscape painting. These paintings depicted the natural beauty of India and its varied and diverse landscape. With the advent of the British rule, another style of painting introduced in India was portrait painting. While Indians had the tradition of painting portraits in miniatures, the British introduced portraits of life-size images. Another style of painting introduced by the British were based on historical themes or history paintings. These paintings glorified the British rule in India and their victories and achievements. Flowering of literature. With the advent of the British, new forms of literary works began to be created. Traditionally, religious and mythological themes were the main subject matter for Indian writing. but under the influence of the British, secular themes expressed through novels, dramas, short stories, and essays began to be composed and printed. Indian writers wrote in many regional languages. The pioneer of modern Hindi literature was Bharatendu Harish Chandra, and it was with the writings of Premchand that Hindi novel reached its excellence. In Bengal, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay was one of the prominent novelists of the initial times. His first novel, Durgesh Nandini, 1865, was the first novel in Bengali language. He also wrote the famous novel Anandamath, a novel which greatly inspired our freedom fighters,
Vande Mataram was composed by Bankim Chandra,
which became the theme song of our freedom struggle. Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote powerful stories in simple language. He became the most popular novelist of Bengal, and his novels were translated in many other Indian languages. Rabindranath Tagore also made major contributions through novels, short stories, poems. His writing focused on Indian society, condition of women, nationalism and patriotism.
He became the first Indian to receive the Nobel Prize
for his work, Gitanjali. Muhammad Iqbal, the great Urdu poet, who composed the stirring song Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. Subramanyam Bharati, the greatest Tamil poet, whose patriotic poems inspired generations of freedom fighters. Music. Till the 19th century, music and dance were performed in the privacy of homes and temples. With the coming of the British, music began to be played publicly. Live program of musical band took place every evening. British also set up clubs where Western music was played. New musical instruments like violin, piano, drum, cello began to be played. Western music was also played in churches. As far as Indian music is concerned, musicians like Pandit Vishnu Digambar Palaskar and Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande enriched Hindustani music in North India. In South India, Tanjavur and Madras became centers of Carnatic music. Photography. In the British period, we get a new and very authentic source of information in photography. Photographs of the colonial period are a visual record of one of the most important events of Indian history. With the advent of colonial period, new changes and innovations took place in arts and culture as a result of the intermingling of the Indian and Western cultural values. Drama. During this time, many dramas were written and enacted in English and other regional languages. The Indian People's Theatre Association made a great contribution, and the Indian dramatists and actors did their best to combine Western and Eastern style of theatre acting. Printing press. Portuguese were the first to introduce printing press in India. In Goa, they published their first book in 1557. Followed by them, the East India Company of England established their printing press at Bombay, now Mumbai, in 1684. James Augustus Hickey was the first person to print first newspaper in India. The invention of printing press had helped in mobilizing and consolidating countrywide opinions on major issues of national interest.